Kate. It's great to be here. So as I was introduced, I'm a director of engineering at Google, and I work in Google's corporate engineering, which is basically the equivalent of IT. And so today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do and our approach to our internal systems. And actually is a pretty interesting follow-on to the previous presentation, because there's a lot of parallels in how we've implemented some of those ideas. So just like most companies, Google started out small. We had a few hundred employees in a few primary locations. Most of our employees were very similar in terms of the type of job that they did, and we had a single mission of advancing search. But since then, over the last 15 years, we've experienced hyper growth. And in 2018, we had over 85,000 employees, and much more now. And we were in 50 different countries with 600 buildings. And of course, we manage hundreds of thousands of devices. And so you can imagine that the infrastructure and the things that are required are maybe a little bit different. But the thing is that in a lot of ways, our internal engineering is a lot like any other large enterprise IT. We have a whole bunch of vendors, that systems don't work well together. We have a lot of legacy applications that are absolutely business critical, but we don't want to invest in. And we are, of course, always being asked to do more with less. And also, you know, our employees, the expectation of the workers, and you're like, that was in the previous presentation, is going up every year. They expect more for their technology, from their workspaces and their environment. And so I want to talk through some of the different ideas and some of the different strategies that we've employed to enable these. Because at the heart of it, right, and I think this is true of any team whose primary customer is the employees, is really about how do you make it feel like a startup? How do you allow each person that comes to work, you have the singular goal of allowing them to do their best, to create an environment where they can be innovative, they can be creative, and they can be engaged and productive. Oh yes, and do it with as little cost as possible. And so how do we do that at Google? The first thing that comes with any really large, big distributed company is how do you bring people together? We have spent a ton of effort really thinking through remote collaboration and how we structure our environment to really empower that. And it's been about, how many people have video conferencing in their office space? Can you raise your hand? That's less than I would have expected. But a decade has passed since we built our first VC prototype, and now video-first meetings are actually a critical part of our culture. Google doesn't usually have conference calls, but every single one of our conference rooms, for the most part, not all of them, there's a few exceptions, have video conferencing in them. And we have found that video meetings create better engagement, better satisfaction, and are more productive. And they're absolutely necessary when you're in a lot of different locations. And so we have really made this a key part of how we construct our buildings and how our teams work together. Another key thing about pervasive video conferencing is that we actually, and this sort of went with what Aruna was saying about the dynamic workspaces, is we've actually changed the way our rooms work to enable better video conferencing, everything from the paint colors to lighting. But another thing we've been testing a lot recently is remote summits or remote large gatherings of people. So typically when most companies set up video conferencing, they have one large room talking to another large room, maybe a couple people calling in. What we've started to find in our research is that actually for those types of meetings, having everyone join as a single person in their own room actually is more effective. It encourages people to talk more than once. It prevents side conversations, so it creates a better feeling of inclusiveness for meeting attendees. And it allows people to kind of work better together in this distributed remote way. And so if you think about that, it kind of helps you think differently about your workspaces and the way you're structuring or maybe setting up real estate and meeting rooms. Another part that was also mentioned is we do have virtual whiteboarding and have really invested in this, whether it's with our technology of a Jamboard that we also sell externally, or just using an app on your tablet, also applet, to draw and collaborate. The virtual whiteboards where both people in different locations can collaborate on the same surface has been a complete game changer. And it really empowers those types of meetings where you do want to do whiteboard stickies, or you do want to brainstorm and draw out your ideas together. Another really important part about remote collaboration is the way that we use docs, sheets, and slides. When I came to Google about 3 years ago, I think this was probably the biggest shocking thing to me. For people who have used it, like I thought of, docs as like a place where you do word processing and sheets as a place for analysis. But at Google, they're actually different because they're used as collaboration surfaces and how people work together. And so let me just give you some examples. So when it comes to docs, if you and someone have to work on like a email together, instead of having each person write, or one person write and the other person edit, the way that they do it is two people will just work together in real time, showing their screen up on the video conference or within the meeting. If you want to brainstorm with people, sometimes people will just get a doc and everyone will write their ideas in a single doc or in tabs of a spreadsheet. And in this way, we've completely transformed the usage of what was once a word processing application into a surface that provides a rich way to share and collaborate across different ideas. Another key part of this that really is important is this idea of one-click sharing. Very seldom will you sit in a meeting at Google where someone will not present something. Even in one-on-ones, people will have agendas of things they want to talk about and they'll present them to one another. And this is really powerful because in the past, when people think about video conferencing, it's like, how do I hook up my computer or what have you? But because everything is one click and can be done from any laptop, you'll sit in a meeting that's an hour long and 4 or 5 different people will present from different computers at different parts of the locations. And it all just works. And this can be very, very powerful and allow people to contribute different ideas and share even when they're not necessarily in the home office. Another trick that we use is because Docs integrates really nicely if you're using Google Calendar, we add things like running agendas to the meeting invites. And so, for example, in my staff meeting that happens every Monday, we have one of these. And on Friday, I use the schedule send in Gmail to say, does anyone have items? And because everyone on the meeting can edit the doc, people write their different topics that they want to discuss, and then we show up Monday and we can just take notes in. And so in that way, each week, the new notes kind of go on top. And it's really helpful if you miss a meeting, you know where to go, it's the same doc every time. And the permissions and everything are managed automatically, so it also stays secure should people come or go from the team and the meeting. And so this is very powerful and useful. Another, I think, important thing is that when I used to think about comments and docs, I always thought about it as a way of editing. But with the way that comments and action items are used at Google are completely different. When we write designs for like an engineering or a product, a lot of the time the discussion in the comments can actually be as interesting and useful as the doc itself. Because people will ask a question and other people respond, and you'll have a whole dialogue. This is also very helpful if you have people in different time zones. So I have a team in Munich and a team in New York. There's actually not a lot of overlap of only like 2 or 3 hours to schedule meetings. But by using docs and comments, you can bring the discussion offline and people can collaborate more easily across time zones. And there's ways of viewing just the action items that are assigned to you. And so this can also be a great way if you have a culture of actually using these for people to find out if they were assigned an action item in a meeting they weren't in, or follow up on things that they might have missed throughout the week. So in addition to remote collaboration, we also care a lot about productivity. We want it to make it easier for employers to get their jobs done, because when you have 100,000 plus employees, saving a little bit of time here and there can actually add up to really significant savings across the company. And so we have a big focus on reducing friction. One of the ways we do that is we allow people to choose their own devices. One of the other main motivations behind this is actually we have customers all over the world using all different kinds of platforms, operating systems, computers. And so we want to allow our employees to do that as well, so that we can design for everyone, because there's not just a segment of the market that uses search. And so this presents a lot of interesting challenges for people in IT, because we run a very, very heterogeneous environment. And so we need to make sure that things are, patches are up to date, that people have the applications when they need them, binary verification, and there's a lot of interesting infrastructure that we've had to build to enable this type of fleet with bring your own device and use what you want. One of the foundations behind that is a technology called BeyondCorp. So BeyondCorp is a zero trust model. So how many people know what a VPN is? Most of you, hopefully. So for those who don't, a VPN is sort of like a garden wall. And once you have the keys, you're inside and you can access everything. Well, at Google, security is paramount for everything we do. Our customer data, what we do, security, it's an absolute foundation in one of our company values. And so BeyondCorp actually allows us to have a much more secure model, because our trust decisions are based on a set of factors, not just if you're authenticated or not. And so me accessing the same thing on my phone versus my corporate laptop, I might have different access and permissions, even though I have the same login and credentials. Similarly, if I took my computer to a different location in the world, I might also have different access compared to being on the Google network. And so because of this, we have a lot of flexibility and more control and security on critical devices, critical resources. Another great thing about this model is it also has allowed us to set up our Wi-Fi networks, that even if you go to different buildings, you never have to get on the network. You're just on, and it works magically, with the exception of a couple buildings, that we couldn't do that by law. Another way we've really pushed the envelope with our kind of IT innovations is something called grab and go. So this is a really great example of how we've scaled and saved significant dollars with IT. Essentially what it is if you need a laptop, you get one in a self-service kind of rack, and then when you're done, you just put it back. I was traveling to the Bay Area once, not that long ago, and my husband's laptop looks really similar to mine, and at 4 a.m. they look the same, or they are the same. And so when I took it, I got on the airplane and didn't realize I had grabbed the wrong computer until I opened it and saw the login screen. But with this, this was a lifesaver, because even though my flight got in at 7:30 and I had a really important presentation in a couple hours, I could go here, I didn't have to talk to anyone, I didn't have to have my password reset, I could just log in and I had access to everything that I needed, all of my documents and my presentation. And this has been really a huge impact to our bottom line, because it allows our employees to have 24/7 laptop replacements when they need it. We also have made this all available. It works with Google Chromebooks, and it's all available on open source, so you can set this up at your own workplace. But this is a really great way of saving time and allowing people not have to talk to a tech and still be able to have a laptop when they need it. We've also seen a huge rise in people using it just when they need a second computer, like for testing or some other sort of reason. There's all sorts of interesting reasons, actually. But yeah, so been a huge cost savings for us, and also a win for employees. So as I mentioned at the start, as we've grown and tried to scale, we've also tried to really think about efficiency. And every dollar that you spend on internal tools and internal infrastructure is money that you're not spending elsewhere to grow your business. And so we've really tried to focus on things that will have an impact that's both measurable and noticed. And so with that, we have a tool called Automatic Room Suggestions. It's available in Calendar. And it's a really smart tool that uses AI. so that you can book meeting rooms easily in different locations. So, for example, I have a team in New York and Munich, and if I want to book a meeting with 4 people in New York and 1 in Munich, it will know, it doesn't rely on me having to know where their desk is and what floor they're on or what meeting rooms. It will all just happen like magic on the back end. And so it looks at where the attendees are based, past preferred rooms, the number of guests, and even special accommodations. So for example, if you have someone that you're trying to set up a meeting with who has hard of hearing and needs a hearing loop in a room, this takes that into consideration and will book those rooms for that person without the person doing the scheduling needing to know. And so this is actually available as a product. Another thing is that we really care a lot about conference room usage. So 30 to 40% of conference rooms are not used at Google sometimes. So we've been working on making that better because real estate is scarce and expensive. And so when we can make really good use of the stuff that we have, well, then that's really good. And also, as we're scaling, we don't want people not to have rooms. So we've done that in 2 ways. So one is called automatic room release, and I don't think it's in G Suite yet, but it will be. If it isn't yet, it might be. But it's a tool that will basically look at declines of the meeting. And if a person, for example, the meeting I talked about before where I had someone in Munich, let's say they declined and I no longer needed that room. Or I had a couple people decline in New York and I only needed a 1-person room. Well, it will adjust and automatically rebook the rooms for you. We also use occupancy detection. So if in one of our rooms someone doesn't join the video conference or we don't see that they're there, we will actually release the room and then someone can rebook it. And we've seen 60% of rooms released this way to actually get rebooked. So it's pretty significant. The second big thing that we do is we have a room insights dashboard, since if you manage your own real estate or you're a facilities manager, really understanding what rooms get used or underutilized, what's happening, what equipment might not be working. And so this is really powerful for us as well in understanding our efficiency and making sure we're set up to make smart decisions. So at a big company, we have a lot of big events. We have a lot of people. And that means we have to seat a lot of people, both physically and virtually. And the thing about these large event spaces is that most companies, they're really great to have when you need them, but they can be very cumbersome because you have to have specialized AV staff, or they can be very difficult to set up. So several years ago, we made the decision that for all of our Tech Talk spaces, we really wanted to rethink them and make them DIY. And so what we did was we built a lot of infrastructure that allowed the technology to basically work the same way all of our video conferencing does. You book them using Google Calendar the same way you would book a regular conference room. You can present from your laptop the same way you would join a video conference using Meet. And people join from other locations into the meeting rooms the same way they would any other conference room. And so this way it became very seamless and very useful, and we saw utilization go way, way up. And so this was one of our big investments in terms of efficiency and usage of these very pricey and potentially underutilized space. Another important part of our values at Google is really thinking about diversity and inclusion. We build our products to be used by everybody, and so that also extends to our employees. And we really tried, when we think about our internal tools and things that we use, to think about the humanity of our products. And so an example of this is using voice commands for people who can't see the touch screen to join a video conference. That's one of the main reasons. Another thing that we've done is we've invested a lot in ML and the way we design our rooms, especially like lighting, to work really well for people with different skin tones. And we've really made an effort in this way to make video conferencing inclusive for all of our employees. Another thing is on our team directory, and these are very little things, right? We added my last name is kind of a mouthful. The first thing people meet me, they always ask how to say it. You can actually record how to say your first and last name, which can remove that moment of where you're very awkward and don't know how to introduce yourself to maybe someone you haven't met in person. We also allow people to specify their personal pronouns, which is really important to people in different communities to be able to say if they're a he, she, them, they. And so that's been a big win for us. Another tool that we use a lot is called Dory. And so Dory is basically, it's a very simple Q&A application where people will put in questions and people can upvote or downvote them or add comments. The thing about Dory and where it helps with inclusivity is that if you do a big presentation or a meeting or an all hands at Google, you're encouraged to never take live questions. And the reason why is that by forcing all the questions into a Dory for every meeting, it ensures that everyone, no matter who is in each location, has an equal voice. And a great part about this too is that because people can vote on the questions, you no longer have the situation where the person who happens to get first to the mic asks the question that no one cares about. They're voted on by popularity, and when you go to present them in a Q&A portion of the meeting, they're presented in order based on the upvotes. And so it's a really great tool for just making an even playing field, even when people are in different locations. So last, I want to just describe a little bit of our approach to IT, because I think it is a little bit different. And it's some of the ways we try to think about innovative or develop some of these different ideas, and walk you through a quick example. So the first thing is that my teams, even though we're internal to Google, actually are structured the same way most of the external product teams. I have software engineers and product managers, user researchers, and designers. We think about the same sort of problems in that we design customer journeys and we do research and we prototype an idea and then we'll build something at scale. And so in this way, it's very similar. The other thing is that when we think about IT, we don't just think about, is this the right third-party system and doesn't have the right cost? We really try to think about Google Spaces holistically. So we don't just say, oh, we're the software team or we're the hardware team. We really try to think about the whole different parts and how this all fits together. And this can include everything from not just like, what you're doing, but what is the supply chain and who in the vendors are that you're using? What is the maintenance and total cost? Because if you're going to deploy this to your 25,000 video-enabled conference rooms, how are you going to govern that over time? And so an example of how we've done this. So this is an example of our old lecterns. And in this photo, or series of photos, you can see some places where the space isn't exactly inviting. And it doesn't speak to our brand, and I think the wires and cabling lead to a bit of chaos. And moreover, I've actually stood behind one of these, and they go up to like here, and I'm pretty short, and so people could only see the top of my head on video. And so we wanted to reinvent this as we were thinking about the DIY tech spaces, tech talk spaces I talked about. And so we took the same approach of like, who are our customers and what do they care about? For a presenter, we wanted them to be able to focus on their presentation and instill confidence. For the audience, we just wanted people to be able to focus on the message and not be distracted by a very tall podium. And we wanted to use like common off-the-shelf components to make it really easy to maintain and troubleshoot when things went wrong. And so we did this much like you would any other product. We brainstormed, we did a design sprint, we came up with ideas. We built models out of foam, which you can see there. And this is where we landed. It's our concept in a bunch of different ways, but the key things I wanted to show some of the nuances is one, it's designed to adjust in height so that no matter how tall you are or short you are, or even if you're in a wheelchair, it will work well for you to be able to give a presentation. It uses a touchscreen just like our GVC units, and in fact, it works exactly the same. There's not a lot of cables to figure out how to connect your laptop. And it also uses a subtle branding, just like our consumer hardware products, so you actually know you're at Google and you have some feeling about that. So this was our final prototype that we've started to deploy, and we're pretty excited about how it turned out. So that's just an example. So back to my original question, how do you make a big, large enterprise feel like a startup? I think it comes down to a few key things. One is make sure you focus on the full scope of the problem that you're trying to solve and think holistically from end to end. We always talk about how the best support ticket is the one that's never created. And so in that way, really thinking about how do you remove friction and make it really easy for people. Second is, I think that the tools and systems that you deploy, they can either enhance your culture or they can hamper it. And so you need to be deliberate about what are the things that you value and what do you want to enable and optimize for. Because the fact is, like any tool evaluation should be more than just the cost and the features. You need to think about everything from how people will interact with it and what sort of values it instills and how you can get people to use it. And finally, like use an engineering approach, like do research, ask questions. If you have employees as your main customers, you have a captive audience. And so it gives you a lot of advantages. So hopefully you can test and iterate. So finally, thank you all for having me. It's been great to be here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.